rickmuathithmuathith.com. For today, let's take a look at a stock here that has had a nice run over the last couple of months, moving from, let's call it about $2 all the way to the highs here of about $10. That's a huge return in about 3 months. Let's take a look at the chart and see what we can learn from it. Number one, we can see that the explosive move corresponds nicely with what we look for, which is we are looking for stocks that are breaking out, especially if they're breaking out to all-time highs on the RSI like it did here during this period here when it was, let's call it between $2 and $2.50, and that corresponds nicely. So we're talking about this period here, and we see that the MACDs were also moving to all-time highs on both MACD settings, so which is exactly what we want to see. And again, we see another breakout in the RSI corresponding again with the MACDs moving to fresh all-time highs and also moving above zero for the first time. So I'm talking about this period here and this price movement right there, which was actually a breakout above a previous weekly closing high. So we can see at the beginning of the move, the stock did meet the minimum requirements for a quality breakout. And we can also see that during this breakout here that did eventually return some good movement to the upside. This breakout here was successful. And we can see that again, we see it had 2 weeks of rest. So talking about this period here where the stock closed lower for 2 weeks before subsequently breaking out. So if we take a look at this, we can see that there was a weekly closing high here. We had 2 weeks of rest and a breakout. Now that we've had a pullback of the recent weekly closing high, and before I do that, the reason why we are using the weekly chart and not the monthly on this one is because on the monthly for an IPO, we don't have fully developed indicators. For example, we don't have the RSI or the main MACD. So because we don't have fully developed indicators, we have to take a look at the next time frame, and the next time frame from the monthly, of course, is the weekly. So what I'm getting at here is anybody who wants to trade this from a breakout standpoint can always set an alert when the stock moves above this recent weekly closing high at 9.40. So you set an alert similar to this period here when somebody would have set an alert at about 4.7 or 4.75, and of course as the stock broke out, you would have taken that opportunity to see whether there was any upside move. Of course, when you are buying it at that particular point, you don't know. You're just taking a bet that the momentum is such, is so strong that it might see higher prices. So what I'm saying here is would like to see another week down below 9.40, and then any subsequent breakout in the coming weeks is all you need to see. So anybody who is playing momentum can wait for a breakout above the recent weekly closing high. Now, one thing I can point out here we can learn from this experience here is there was a movement above 69.1 on the weekly RSI, and then we had a dip below it. So we're talking about this pullback here, and you see that once we moved back above 69.1 here, the stock essentially was confirming that it had momentum. So we are talking about this period here. So as it was breaking out, the RSI was going back above 69.1, and I'll come back to this in a second. Now if you take a look at the daily, anybody who would have wanted to play these pullbacks, all of these pullbacks have one thing in common, and they were all good pullbacks because you can see pullback and a move higher, pullback here and a move higher, pullback and a move higher. In fact, even recently a pullback, and we are starting to see some life in the stock, up about 6%. The thing that was common with all these pullback periods is you can see, even going back to this period here that the stock was bouncing below RSI 50 and back above it with uniform action. That's the key, uniform action. Uniform action at the 50 line for the re-entry there, which was successful. Uniform action between below the 50 line and back above it. So the re-entry back above 50 is a good entry point. Here we have uniform activity below 50 and back above it for the re-entry somewhere there. And you can see over the last 2 or 3 days of action, we are bouncing successfully above that 50 RSI level on the daily. So you can close your eyes and go long, ask questions later. So that's one view that can give you a reason. If you don't want to wait for any future breakout, you can actually go long based on this support on the 50 level on the daily RSI. Now, there's also another way you can reason out that as long as it is holding, one can play for a bounce, and it is this line right here connecting RSI lows. You just draw them like this, and you can see that ever since the line was established by these 2 points, you can take a look at here. We bounced with uniform activity below the blue line, back above it for the re-entry here for a nice movement higher. And now we are seeing it coming back to test this blue line of support, and it seems to be holding. So as long as it is holding on this line, one can go long, and you can always get out at some point if it ever moves back below this line of support. So any movement below this line of support can be considered a sell, but as long as it is holding, back above the 50 RSI level, one can consider this a good quality breakout, or at least a good quality bounce area. Something else to consider here, and just really doesn't change much, but it's good to understand why the stock is also bouncing around RSI 50. All we have to do is figure out where the breakout began. So the RSI broke out above this line. So this was the previous RSI tops line, and once we moved above that, the stock has never looked back. We're talking about this period here. So if you draw a line from that entry, it happens to be somewhere around there, and again you can see that market's been coming back to test that level, and every time it bounces on that level with uniform activity, you can see that this has been a nice entry point, doing the same thing again here. So there's at least 3 lines there. This line, the line that we drew previously, which was the green line, or let's draw it in blue now, which is around the 50 level. And then also we have another line connecting RSI lows line, which is offering a third reason why it is bouncing right now. Let's go back to that weekly chart as I promised, and we can also use the idea that if it moves back above the RSI 69.1 level, any movement back above that 69.1 level, the stock would be confirming momentum, just like it during this period here. So what you'd want to see, if you're going to take the opportunity that it is bouncing on the daily, you'd really want to see the stock move back above 69.1 on the weekly RSI, confirming strength, and at some point in the future you'd like to see a breakout above 9.40. Eric Muatha with Muatha.com. As always, good luck, peace, and riches, blessings, riches, blessings, yes. Whoa.